Thanks for spending a few moments with me as we discuss teaching grammar. We have three learning goals for this lesson. The first is I want us to compare the prescriptive and descriptive teaching strategies. I also want to consider what's best for students as we dissect grammar instruction. I also want to contrast standard English grammar rules with how English is actually used in culture and academia. Hopefully the learning activity will help us dig into this a little bit deeper. It's three questions. The first is I want us to create a grammatically correct response to the question, how are you? Next, I want us to consider if it's ever preferable or allowable to use a preposition at the end of a sentence. And then also, can we use double negatives in a grammatically correct sentence? These are all grammatically challenging scenarios, but hopefully we can come up with an adequate and useful response by the end of this discussion. So let's come back to this activity in a few moments. Teachers have to understand why the material they teach is valuable. They have to know the best ways to present the information, and they absolutely have to believe that they can make a difference. There's a split that exists between the function of grammar as a part of curriculum in today's education system, and there's a problem with the perception of the academic value of grammar instruction. So grammar prescriptivists have argued for hundreds of years that students have to know and use grammar rules. The prescriptivist teacher is going to teach these rules. They're going to provide students with a very standardized approach to writing and communication. On the other hand, descriptivists, they're going to present an alternative to this teaching model because they recognize that formal set of rules doesn't always mesh with how language is used, right? It can conflict with our current language. A descriptivist teacher is going to consider the value of diagnosing writing errors, but their primary effort is going to be to make sure that their students are able to accurately communicate in various contexts. So regardless of how teachers teach grammar, it's understood and accepted that the grammar system, the rules and the logic and the structure, provides the foundation or the underpinnings for critical literacy. These rules give order and reason to a very complex structure. One element that I'm sure both the prescriptive and the descriptive teachers will agree upon is that we all want what's best for our students. So when we look at how grammar instruction was used or has been used through history, we can look back to Quintilian. Over 2,000 years ago, he attempted to use a synthesis of the rules-based approach to teaching grammar as well as the more descriptive approach, right? And he understood that one form could complement the other. So instead of teaching his students to write and speak correctly by giving them a rule book to follow, Quintilian exposed his students to a fairly formidable stack of literature that was considered the best that society had to offer, whether it was culturally relevant or used in the political system. His students used these resources to improve their writing and their oral discourse. It was a highly regarded method of teaching back in his era, and it did prove to increase his students' ability to communicate and use language in various different contexts. So he used that academic grammar with a very contemporary organic grammar. And like I said before, the results over the course of the years that followed were highly successful. So a more current model of this instruction, the synthesis of both the rules being applied to the recognition that language is changing, is found in our Common Core State Standards. It's not just the Common Core State Standards. There's many state level language arts standards and curriculums that are injecting rules, grammar rules, into writing-based activities, knowing that one is going to improve the other. The Common Core State Standards notes that the prescriptive grammar methodology is only one component of a full course of grammar instruction. So the prescriptive grammar theoretician suggests that students should know the rules that govern proper and effective communication. These rules provide the base for language knowledge. They suggest that written communication requires correct grammar. You have to use this grammar in order to make sure your intended message reaches the correct audience. And they also note that this methodology gives the advanced learner an increased level of control over their language choices. It allows them to communicate accurately at an advanced level in different contexts. The descriptivist appreciates the rules. They understand that these rules provide structure and logic, but they also know that language grows, it changes. This approach acknowledges that students learn differently. They understand that the classical approach to memorizing rules may no longer be the best route to take. Research has shown that the traditional grammar teaching isn't necessarily effective for improving writing unless it's directly applied to a specific contextual writing activity. So the effort to determine what works best in grammar instruction gives teachers a strategy that's more of a whole language strategy. It's not just focused on English writing and grammar-based writing in the English classroom, but it's across content areas. Grammar instruction works best when the focus is on using grammar in specific actual writing. To a descriptivist, grammar instruction is growing as language grows, and it can be used to illuminate the expansion of the English language, especially as we immerse ourselves in a more diverse culture in academia and beyond. So let's take a moment and consider the learning activity. All right, the question, how are you? Could be addressed, as we all know, the grammatically correct way. I am well. What about I am good? So in today's language, I would suggest that I am good is just as grammatically correct as I am well. I am well is more specifically answering the question in regards to your health. I am good is describing a state of being. Am, being the form, a form of to be, is more of the whole state of being rather than just your health. So either one would be grammatically correct. However, the prescriptivist would say, I am well is the correct response. Ending a sentence with a preposition. I came up with 4 structures where it's not just allowable, but it actually makes the sentence mean what you need it to mean, where it's communicating more effectively. The passive structure. An example of that is he dislikes being fussed over. And then you have the relative clause. An example of that is she must be allowed to complete the project she is taking on. We have the infinitive structure. The twins claimed they had no one to play with. And then there was questions that end with, what, who, or where, such as, where is the water I should avoid swimming in? And then finally we had double negatives. There's 2 phrases in 2 very famous songs that I came up with. We don't need no education, and I can't get no satisfaction. Clearly, the authors of these words weren't trying to engage in a mathematical equation, or 2 negatives are equaling a positive. These sentences are used to create emphasis. The double negatives mean more in these scenarios than they would otherwise. So depending on the context, a double negative can be used. It can prove to be effective communication. So in this lesson, we discussed several differences between prescriptive and descriptive grammar instruction. We talked about how we can use grammar instruction to give our students a better way of approaching writing and communication. So thanks for taking the time to consider how grammar instruction can improve your students' communication.